Blackhawks rookie Connor Bedard was held off the score sheet for the first time in his career. And John Tavares scored for the Leafs, who are now 2-1. Joseph Wall made 27 saves in his first start of the season. You know, Nick Alberga was all over it from the Nation Network. He joins us to talk about it. Earlier, Nick, our co-host Darren Dupont, said it felt like a Monday night game, just a whole lot of nothing going on there in Scotiabank Arena. What did you see?
There's never anything going on at Scotiabank Arena, Rod. It's always great to be with you. It's just one of those buildings, and you've been through a ton in your career as well and covering games and stuff like that. There's just nothing cooking, which is insane to me because Connor Bedard, the Phenom, was in town, and it's game 3 of the season, and the same old story for the Maple Leafs, can't get up for an inferior opponent, a lottery team, which has been a theme for this squad, specifically in the month of October the last couple of years, specifically under Sheldon Keefe. So I was a bit stunned at the effort last night. I didn't think they were that bad, but I thought Chicago was opportunistic. And I was talking to a buddy. I'm like, why would any team play their number one goalie against the Leafs? It seems like every time a backup plays against Toronto, they beat them. And as you referenced, Arvid Soderblom, who I'm sure a lot of Leafs fans had no clue was until last night, gets the victory last night.
I didn't know who he was, and I've watched every Chicago game. I don't even know who. I guess it's Peter Mrazek.
Yeah.
Chicago is not a good team, so there should be some concern that I would think that they came into Toronto and won 4-1.
I'm not sure it's concern. It's like more like, here we go again, can't get up for every game kind of mentality, right? Because I think in the grand scheme of things, we all know this team is headed to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's just more so the body of work when they get to the springtime, how the team's going to look, how they gel. I think the big concern early on, Rod, is, seemingly the same story every season is them defensively. You add some of these guys, and that's great offensively, guys like John Klingberg. But how does that translate defensively? And so far, the returns are not very good, but albeit we're 3 games into this season and things seem to rectify themselves through an 82-game slate. So we'll see what happens here.
Thank you for the reminder. I'm usually the one saying that. We got to back up the view here for a second. But of all the newcomers, and there's a lot in that lineup, who's been good so far and who hasn't? You know who I'm talking about: Bertuzzi, Domi, Klingberg, Reeves. Who's met expectations and who hasn't?
It's hilarious that you ask me this question right now because I would think it's funny the way I'm about to answer. But I think Ryan Reeves has made the biggest impact because I think you look at some of the other guys. There's some fleas there. Like Max Domi hasn't been particularly good. Tyler Bertuzzi's taken 5 minor penalties in 3 games. The old Michael Bunting effect. They need one player on the team to be that guy who takes too many penalties. So far, it's been a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. John Klingberg's been good offensively, defensively. We all knew what he brought to the table or lack thereof. So, I think he's been a mixed bag. So to answer your question, it's probably Ryan Reeves and certain the impact he's brought. A couple scraps so far, a couple offensive opportunities, getting the crowd going a bit. We mentioned how quiet they've been. So Ryan Reeves, weirdly enough, probably my answer, Rod.
Well, it's an interesting market. I've never lived a day in Toronto. I've been there lots. Pressure, I compare it to what I see with the Cowboys and certainly here in Miami with the Dolphins. But Nick, you guys don't allow that team to take a night off. Yet last night they did. So what's their reaction to it, and what's the buzz in Toronto like today?
I think everybody's used to it. Having said that, going on social media, and you just never know with the algorithms and the shadow banning on X these days, aka Twitter. I have no clue what's going on because we just can't read it anymore. I have no clue what's going on with X. But I think the general sense doing my show earlier today and just social media in general is that people are a bit unhappy, upset. But in the grand scheme of things, and I've never been that guy, I'm usually the sky is falling guy. Like last October, I was going nuts because they were losing to the worst teams in the world. But it is an 82-game slate. You're not going to have it every night. But I think people are wondering if, here we go again. Because that's the big conversation. It's sort of like a civil war in this market right now. Because you had the Dubasites, the Kyle Dubas crowd. He's gone now in Pittsburgh. And now you have the Brad Treliving crowd. And they feel like this team is the right one to get over the hump. So I think all year long, that's going to be a narrative that's going back and forth. Is this the right team? Because it's a bit of a different style the Leafs are looking to play this season.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the commentary. And but again, you know what? It's the first year under Brad Treliving. It's not like they're going to fire them if they don't achieve their goals. But I will say this, one last thing before we look ahead. I watched the first 2 periods of that game last night and then flipped over to the Panthers and Devils, and the Panthers almost gave it away. But to me, Austin Matthews did not really show up. What did you think about his game last night?
I thought he was good. He had a bunch of shots on net, and I think it's so unrealistic to expect this guy to get a hat trick every game. In fact, he scored late in regulation. It was actually called back due to an offside challenge review, and it happened a couple times in the last couple minutes of that game. But I didn't think he was particularly that bad. I thought he was pretty decent. I thought Nylander was fantastic. Like, there's a lot of pros to grab, and I think along those lines, I was just talking about Ryan Reeves. I think it takes the attention away from some of the big boys, where the story, and understandably so, in recent years has been, the core four and how they react and how they play come the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it will again this year in the springtime. But I think a guy like Ryan Reeves and others like Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi will help to push the narrative elsewhere. And so I'm curious about that. But so far, so good for Austin Matthews this season. I mean, it took him a long, long time last year to get the 6 goals, and he's already there. So I think he's feeling pretty damn good about himself right now.
Good to hear. Now, of course, they've been promoting this home opener here in Florida for all summer. It's Thursday night. Leafs are here. It's a rematch of last year's round 2 series. Any remnants of that in your mind will be in the Leafs' mind, or is it a new season that's distant history?
No, there better be. There better be. Like, it's crazy. 3 games into the season, I'm calling this a measuring stick game, a measuring stick road trip. They got Tampa coming up on Saturday. No Vasilevsky. You have to find a way to win that game. Like, the Lightning can't keep the puck out of the net. It's more so about the 2 guys playing goal than anything else for that team. But, I mean, starting with the Florida Panthers on Thursday, I think you have to set the tone for the way the season has gone. I hope there's a bitter taste in their mouths, considering what transpired in round 2 last spring, where it was a complete no-show after game 2. Like, I'm still befuddled as to what transpired in that series. So, I think they think they're a bit of a different team. You bring Max Domi in, you bring Bertuzzi, you bring Reeves. I think, again, they were a victim of being thrown around a bit in that series. There's some different guys on that roster for the Florida Panthers. Radko Gudas is now with Anaheim, but they still have Matthew Tkachuk. They're pretty banged up right now. I think it is a measuring stick game for the Maple Leafs. And again, there better be some remnants of how they felt last springtime, and I think I want them to set the tone early here for.
Paul Jefferson in Humboldt says, please ask Nick if Minton is staying in Toronto for the season. Thanks.
I don't think so. This is a big storyline to watch over the next couple weeks. He's played 3 games so far, and I think he's realizing really, really quickly that exhibition hockey is not the same as the regular season. And last night specifically, I think there were a couple instances where he's just like a step behind, which is understandable. Like, let's not forget, like, this was a guy who wasn't even on the radar to play in preseason games, never mind the regular season. So it's been a phenomenal story. I think there's no shame in sending him back to junior first and foremost. He'll go back to Kamloops, rip it up once again. And number 2, I think obviously he'll be on the radar for the World Junior team. So I think it's a win all around. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse. Who knows what happens over the next couple games into this road trip. But I would say over the next couple games, Rod, they'll have a pretty good inclination of what they want to do. And on top of that, I think it's important to note there's a lot of people waiting in the wings with the AHL's Marlies that could be guys who can make an impact right away, whether it's a Nick Robertson or a Pontus Holmberg who could slot in up the middle, or even a Bobby McMahon. So they do have some options. I think this Minton story has been fantastic, but do I see him sticking for the duration of the season? Probably not.
Troy in Toronto says, yes, Leaf talk. I'm here for it. Good booking, Clark. Well, just with keeping a casual eye on the Leafs, they've got Matthew Nyes up. They've signed Noah Gregor. They got enough young kids, in my opinion, unless I've misread that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a healthy blend, right? Because everything is going to steer through the top 6. And I think that was the thinking, too, in bringing 2 solid wingers in the form of Bertuzzi and Max Domi into the mix. I think they want to create depth. I think the one takeaway I have from teams like Vegas and even like the Carolinas and even St. Louis a couple of years ago, win the cup, like, they have the depth up and down, and I think their 4th line can hurt you and their 1st line can hurt you. And I think when you look at the Leafs specifically, the top 3 lines can provide offense. Having said that, we just talked about Fraser Minton. The 3rd line hasn't done much. They had a couple opportunities last night, a couple tap-in opportunities for the youngster Minton, and he couldn't score. But certainly in the case of Matthew Nyes, like, he's here to stay. He'll be on this team for the for the season. I think he obviously showed something a bit last spring in playing 10 games, and so far he's been pretty decent. But I think the best move for him would be finding his way, I should say, into the top 6. So we'll see if it works out for Matthew Nyes. But I think early on that's been a story that will be larger and larger, is like how to get some depth scoring going, because it's been the majority of the scoring once again has come from the top 6 here.
Great update, Nick. I guess while I have you, where does the Twitter handle the Golden Muzzy come from?
Yeah, so I get this a lot. In fact, back in media school, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name Roger Lajoie, big media personality here in
Of course,
Toronto.
the Raj. Yeah. The Raj.
Exactly. So the Raj taught me in school, I guess 12 years ago now, 12 years ago now, which is crazy. But it was new media class. It was pretty much at the beginning of Twitter, and it was Movember. I was younger. My mustache came a bit blonder, so I was like, "Let's go with the Golden Muzzy," not thinking it would stick 13 years later, and I'd actually have a legitimate career in broadcasting. So yeah, here we are, and I can't change it.
The Raj. We know each other from CHL days, Canadian Junior.
Yeah.
Major Junior Hockey League. All right, Nick. Appreciate it, man. Great job. Keep it up.
My pleasure, buddy. Take care.
There you go, the Golden Muzzy, joining us from the Nation Network.